All right. Good morning, everyone. That's right. That's right. Welcome to a very special event, the world premiere of KHOU TV's Juneteenth documentary, Juneteenth, 1865 to 2024, A Legacy of Song. Yay. I'm Deborah McGoy. I'm Assistant Vice President of University Relations here at UHD. And as many of you here might know, I'm a KHOU alum, a proud alum. Yay. I was a reporter for KHOU for about 12 years, a few years ago. We won't say how many. It's more than a few. Anyway, when I say world premiere, we mean it. This is the first time, outside of the KHOU people, that anyone will be seeing this documentary. You guys are getting this premiere. So that is a wonderful thing. Now, just to let you know, they'll probably mention it, but this is the fourth in their series of Juneteenth documentaries. So this is installment number 4, and we're getting it right here. Now, thank you must go to KHOU's Director of Local Programming and Community Marketing, Dale Lockett. There he is. Thank you, Dale, for giving me that call and saying, hey, would you guys like to show this? And I'm like, yes, we would. So not only are we getting a debut, we are also getting to get the pleasure of visiting with its producers. Mia Gradney, let's start with her. Yay! Mia is a native Houstonian. Yes, that's an applause-worthy thing. And she anchors the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock news on Channel 11. She's an Emmy Award-winning journalist who worked her way up in the business. Mia has worked for stations in Victoria and Beaumont, then spent more than 10 years at Channel 39 here in Houston. You remember that? Yeah, you got fans. She specializes in breaking news. You may have seen Mia during the 138 hours she spent on air during Hurricane Harvey. Mia is a distinguished alum of Sam Houston State University, and she's in the Hall of Fame there. She stays busy with community work and producing specials like the one you're about to see today. Let's give Mia Gradney a hand. Now, we also have Len Cannon. I think they kind of work together. Len, of course, is the co-anchor of the 5, 6, and 10 p.m. news at Channel 11. In news circles, you've reached OG status, my man.
Thank you.
He's been with KHOU since 2006. That's good. He's won a bunch of awards, Emmys, the National Association of Black Journalists, that's NABJ, their first place award, and Columbia University's DuPont Silver Baton Award for his reporting as a correspondent for Dateline NBC. Oh, which he did for 7 years, probably prior to all the true crime stuff they do, right? We did a little, it was creeping in. All right. Now, when Len told viewers, guys, we're gonna have to evacuate, it was a defining moment for Channel 11, which has seen its share of floods. That was during Hurricane Harvey. The station moved to another location and pressed on. Channel 11 won a coveted Edward R. Murrow Award for its Harvey coverage. Yay. Now, Len is not a native Houstonian, but he got here, like they always say, as fast as he could. He came from Troy, Ohio, which is right outside of Dayton. You're a twin, aren't you?
I am.
He is a twin. His sister is 3 minutes older, and I bet she gives you heck about that.
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Len graduated from Ashland University, which is in Ohio, with a degree in radio and television. He's worked in Toledo, New Orleans, Seattle, New York, but He started out as a DJ. He started out there. So maybe this Juneteenth documentary, since it's focused on music, might have a little something to do with that there. Please welcome Len Cannon. All right, so that's all the intro we need. The floor is yours, folks, to intro the documentary. Come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you so much, Deborah, for that warm welcome and introduction. We're really excited to be here with you. As Deborah had mentioned, this is our fourth installment of the Juneteenth series. It is an award-winning series, and it started with us initially just telling the history of the holiday itself. And then in realizing the history, we noticed that there was this ongoing pursuit of freedom and equality until current day. And so with that, and with each year, we've presented a different subject matter that relates to Juneteenth and African American history. But this is what I tell everyone. Juneteenth is not just Black history. Juneteenth is a shared history, and it is American history. And so is the legacy since then as well. We have discussed everything now from the pursuit of economic equality in year 2. Last year, we did the freedom to learn and focused on education. And this year, we are delighted to bring you a celebration of song, a celebration of music.
So this is very dear to me and I, because if you were in the studio at any given moment, we either dancing or singing. During the commercial break, of course. We love doing this project. It is near to our hearts. What I've come to understand, Mia comes up with the concepts every year, and she's got a plan going forward. And I looked at her and I said, there's no way that we can sustain this. But what I've learned is that Juneteenth is so much bigger than I imagined. I grew up in Ohio, knew nothing about Juneteenth, until, ironically, I moved to the West Coast and ran into people who were from Texas who were having Juneteenth celebrations. And so it is a beautiful thing. It is an American thing because it defines a moment where America continues its march to a more perfect union. And so we're going to keep telling the story in different ways. There is so much history, there's so much texture here, and you will see that in this documentary.
So if you know music, you know that music can be used for a number of things. But what music has been, especially in the African American community, is an oral history. And if you listen to music starting all the way in Africa to present day, it tells the story of the people during that time. And that's what this documentary is. It is an ongoing history told through music and through song. Without further ado, let's get this beautiful documentary rolling. Thank you for attending.
Juneteenth is my 4th of July. It is the point in time which my ancestors were recognized as people.
I think music is absolutely one of the foundational parts of celebrating Juneteenth, for sure.
And it is important that we pay attention not only to the rhythm and the beat, but the message and the meaning of the songs.
At some point, we was like, we got something to say
Bun
too.
B, the Trilogy.
This is what writing is about. This is what singing about it is about.
Where does it come from? Somewhere deep in your soul.
Music is such a part of Black society. It's part of a thing that we have maintained from our ancestors.
If we didn't have our music, I don't know where we'll be.
Juneteenth, 1865 to 2024, a legacy of song.
Welcome to historic Reedy Chapel in Galveston, Texas, a place of worship and praise since 1848.
On June 19, 1865, enslaved people on the island rushed here to Reedy to learn of their freedom.
Together, they would lift their voices in song.
It's those very same songs, along with the songs they sang while forced to work dockside, on plantations, and in fields and on farms, that shaped a legacy of song.
A legacy that started in Africa long before slavery.
The artistic achievements of the Negro are rooted in the rich and ancient cultural heritage of Africa, which in recent times has profoundly influenced all Western art.
Music played a significant role in nearly every aspect of African life. There wasn't a clear-cut time and place for music. There were just different forms that people used for different parts of the day. So you certainly had music that was part of religious ceremonies, but there were also important ways that music was part of labor. So if the fishermen went out in boats to catch fish, maybe they were also doing songs that had a call and response structure as they were catching the fish.
As for instrumentation, the drums were dominant.
Percussion instruments were the most vital to West and Central African music. And when people from other continents made contact with West and Central Africa, the drums are one of the main things that they would comment on. And I think part of that is they produce such loud, full sounds that sometimes you could hear the drumming before you see the people who are producing those very sounds.
The sound of the drum is universal. You don't have to speak a certain language to understand the music. Traveling around the world, going to Brazil, the Caribbean islands, and the Caribbean festivals and carnival and all of that, and then even going over to Ghana when I went, the sound is everywhere. So 55% of the transatlantic slave trade went into Brazil, 35% into the Caribbean islands, only 6% in what we consider the United States or North America. So the majority of that traffic went into Brazil, 55%.
Brazilian sugar plantations drove the demand for slave labor much earlier than the United States, but the new nation would soon catch up naturally, as enslaved people started birthing children in the American colonies.
Do you remember any of the slaves being sold? Do you remember any slave sellers, men that would just buy and sell?
No, sir, I never did see it. I should have never did know that, We heard talk of it, but then I think that was after slave, I think. We heard talk of it. You see them talk about, putting them on stumps, or something high, and beating them off like you did cattle. Beat them off like you did cattle.
Tragically, children could be sold away to other plantations and away from their mothers' tender voices.
Let me first talk about lullabies. Mothers, maybe even fathers, sang lullabies to their children. Children played game songs, so they had their own music that they performed. And then there was the celebration music, the harvest celebrations of cotton, of cane, of sugar, of whatever was the cash crop that you were responsible for growing. There's going to be a harvest at some point.
A harvest that was the result of difficult and forced labor in the worst of conditions. But it's while they worked, enslaved people sang along with each other in a painful yet productive way.
They sang to make the work go faster, but it also was a form of engineering mechanical efficiency to sing while you're working.
There was also singing in their slave quarters.
There is a calm shore to be, is found beneath the mercy seat. Oh mercy seat, oh mercy seat, is found beneath the mercy seat. There is a calm shore to be, around a calm and mercy seat.
The only time they were in the quarters was at night, because they were working from sun to sun. And that was the time when there was an opportunity to express intimacy. And I'm sure there were love calls and expressions, and everybody has a voice. You can hum, you can whistle, you can sing, you can yell.
But there were few instruments on plantations.
One of the first things that changes with the Atlantic slave trade is access to instrumentation. In many cases, enslaved Africans have to recreate the instruments that they would have valued back in their homeland. In some cases, that means trying to reconstruct, based on memory and sound, what they'd had before. And in some cases, there's no access to some of those instruments.
This included drums. Thought to be used for communication between enslaved people, they were often forbidden.
By the 1820s, it was very hard to find drums on farms and plantations across the U.S. South because they were used for rebellion.
Left with nothing but their voices to make music, the enslaved developed a song style and sound that would become the hallmark of Black music.
Did my Lord deliver, the Lord and my God, every man? Did my Lord deliver,
On a recent spring evening, the voices of the Prairie View A&M University Concert Chorale singing an African-American spiritual. It is an HBCU choral tradition that began with the Fisk Jubilee Singers in 1871, just 6 years after the Civil War. Before choirs, spirituals were sung by the enslaved while working the fields, without instruments or for performance. Prairie View A&M Chorale Director Dr. Demetrius Robinson demonstrates with a spiritual classic.
They would have sung it, swing low, sweet chariot.
No music.
No music. Coming for to carry me home. And they would have sung it more with Ebonics, so more closely to their language. Swing low, sweet chariot. Coming for to carry me home. Very a cappella, very spontaneous.
Prairie View sits on property that used to be a plantation, where the enslaved sang the spirituals Dr. Robinson is talking about, songs of joy, pain, and hope for freedom. Field songs became church songs, and by the 1930s, a new genre was born, gospel.
When we think about gospel music as we know it, we have to think about people like Thomas Dorsey.
Dorsey became known as the father of gospel, having written Precious Lord. And at Pilgrim Baptist Church in Chicago, he was pushing spirituals in a different direction. They became more up-tempo, sometimes blurring the lines between sacred and secular.
Basic chord progressions, you might say blues chord progressions. If you close your eyes on Sunday morning,
Gospel choirs exploded in popularity after Dorsey founded the National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses. The music kept evolving and gospel stars were born, like Mahalia Jackson, Mattie Moss Clark, the Reverend James Cleveland, and Edwin Hawkins, who turned the spiritual Oh Happy Day upside down. Dr. Robinson first sings the original version.
Oh happy day, oh happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away. He taught me how to fight and pray. Oh happy day, oh happy day. Very, very traditional, very straightforward.
And then it evolved to what with Edwin Hawkins?
Oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day, and so forth, right?
So it got syncopated?
More syncopated.
It got faster.
Yeah.
Got more secular?
More secular, but also more spontaneous.
Give me Jesus.
From capture to bondage and freedom, spirituals have been woven into the fabric of African American lives.
So every musical style that we know of today, you can trace it back in America that is. You can trace it back to the spirituals, right? We're talking about gospel, ragtime, jazz, blues, all these different things you can link back to the spiritual.
By 1863, freedom rang, but not for all, despite President Abraham Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation declaring all persons held as slaves be freed.
Many people relate to the Emancipation Proclamation, which President Abraham Lincoln signed in September of 1862 to go into effect January 1st, 1863. Now, on January 1st, 1863, there was a Battle of Galveston, where the Confederate Army took back control of the island, therefore delaying enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation. It's not just the sharing of the information, but the information has to be enforced. And because the Confederate Army regained control of the port city of Galveston, that delayed enforcement for 2.5 years.
June 19th, 1865. U.S. General Gordon Granger and troops arrived in Galveston to issue and enforce General Order No. 3, liberating all enslaved people.
When he came to Galveston, just the city, the island, Granger, of course, went to the Osterman building, and that was the headquarters. And from there, issued General Order No. 3.
The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere.
And then the soldiers began to spread the message on the island. But we do know that the soldiers, the Union soldiers, many of them being United States colored troops, would have moved throughout the island, in one of the places being Reedy Chapel, that it is believed through oral histories and stories that the notice was posted on the door. Because the church, of course, is central to the African American community and part of their foundation of faith.
This church is almost as old as Galveston itself.
Reedy Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church, known as the Mother Church of Texas, has withstood the test of time.
Everything that Galveston went through, historically, this church went through. We were here when the 1900 storm came, when the 1885 Great Fire of Galveston came, when emancipation came in 1865. This church was already in existence.
Church members are just as resilient as the place where generations have come to pray.
My name is Sharon Baptiste Gillens. I'm a member and trustee here at Reedy Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church. I've been a member here since the late 80s. Have loved this church since the very first time I came into it.
Sharon is also a genealogist.
I just began to dig and became fascinated with the enormous amount of history that's rooted in this church.
We were part of the Methodist Episcopal Church South, which was a predominantly white congregation in this city. And at some point in 1848, they purchased a lot for the benefit of their enslaved people. This is that lot. That meant that the enslaved people who had up to that point been worshiping with the white congregation now moved their worship
to this spot and worshiped outdoors until they could build a church edifice for themselves. So once they got here, I'm sure that their music increased, their drumming increased, their preaching increased, and their call and worship increased.
Giving hope to an oppressed people ahead of Emancipation Day on June 19th, 1865.
Juneteenth is my 4th of July. It is the point in time which my ancestors were recognized as people. Before June 19, 1865, I could not research my family as people. I had to research my family as property because that's what they were. They were not listed in vital records. They could not legally marry because they were property.
Property no more, the enslaved were informed of their newfound rights by mostly black soldiers right at Reedy Chapel.
General Gordon Granger and United States colored troops and Union troops arrived here in Galveston not to announce emancipation, but to enforce emancipation. And this church would have been the closest church for African descendants to the port of arrival. It became one of the most important locations for the announcement of emancipation.
And with newfound freedom came a flourish of activity in the church, including acquisition of materials and instruments.
You enter the church and your eye is immediately drawn to the altar, but then what rises above the altar, this organ.
It is a beautiful organ. It's just visually stunning. It's a historic 1872 Hook and Hastings pipe organ. And this pipe organ is only one of two in the nation, and the other one is in the Smithsonian. So it has quite a bit of significance here, and it definitely creates a beautiful backdrop for the pulpit and the altar here. We actually still have people who are able to play it. It's magnificent.
The music's pushed out of the age-old pipes, up toward the heavens and into the chapel. The sounds are captivating, moving people in the pews during Sunday service. Together, they sing and give gratitude for their faith, their freedom, and most of all, the church.
So that's our history. That's our heritage. That's not only Reedy's history, it's Galveston's history, it's Texas history, and it's United States history.
Houston is home to some of music's biggest stars. Real hometown heavyweights, worthy of the spotlight.
Young, gifted, and black.
From college concert halls to intimate venues and grand theaters like here at the Wortham Center and beyond.
Classically trained musicians and singers have a bright future ahead, thanks to the greats of the past. Marian Anderson, singing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1939. She later became the first black soloist at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. The acclaimed soprano Leontine Price hit the Met stage in 1961. George Shirley became the first black tenor to sing leading roles at the Metropolitan Opera. Just a few of the names who blazed a trail for a growing number of African-American opera singers today.
My teacher says our voices should be like a bird that we let fly.
That new generation includes tenor Lawrence Brownlee and Houston-based soprano Nicole Heaston. Their journey to classical music started in the church.
I grew up in church, in gospel, but a high school choir teacher told me that something about the tone of my voice was suitable for opera. And I didn't really know what opera was about until I was exposed to it.
When I started winning competitions in high school, and I was like, okay, I can make money doing this. That was, the main thing. Am I going to be able to sustain a lifestyle? But what made it the best is that I realized that I could dress up and I could become someone else. And learning to sing in different languages, the challenge of that, and then the extra challenge of communicating in that language to someone else.
A different language and a very different technique. Opera singers belt out songs without microphones.
We use muscles in a different way. So you hear some singers and it seems like the approach to singing is a lot less stress on their body. They have it here, the stress of their singing. But we as opera singers, we believe in supporting from down low. So you don't hear the or that kind of approach to singing. It's more we call it appoggio or leaned upon, supported upon. That's where our sound comes from, using our whole body to make this sound.
You really can't see people in the dark, but you feel it. And you feel that energy and you feel that these people are with you. And when you're there and you're just bearing your soul and singing and praying that everything comes out to a point where they're appreciating what you're doing, and you feel that energy come back, even if it's silent, you feel that energy. That is like electric to have.
Now, Heaston and Brownlee mentor up-and-coming opera singers like Corey McGee and Renee Richardson, seen here performing at Houston's Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church in 2023.
Morning time and evening time and summertime and winter time. Morning time and evening time.
And at the very same concert, George Shirley, who we mentioned earlier. Who is still performing at the age of 88. Classical music, an art form founded in Europe, yet drawing African-American singers whose talents are often discovered and nurtured in a uniquely African-American art form, gospel.
All America News brings you our people's contribution to America and freedom.
Jerry Smith and Sammy Stewart, famed band leader, talk it over. The Boogie Woogie Queen. Sammy led a 30-piece band as background for Jerry. That was for her Carnegie Hall appearance in her Cinco Symphonic concert, about which critics simply rave. This New Orleans miss is making a name for herself in music.
I love playing ragtime because it's really a uniquely African-American musical style. I really wanted to play a piece by an African-American composer, Artie Matthews, because I just feel so connected to my ancestry and my heritage when I get to play these pieces.
Ragtime in different parts of the country developed at around the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and it's a very important precursor to jazz because ragtime is a very syncopated dance music that for a long time had kind of a seedy reputation because it was sometimes played in the same places where maybe gambling and prostitution and drinking went on. And that's what kind of made ragtime an American craze by 1910 because people heard this music. They were familiar with a lot of the instruments, but they'd never heard the instruments played that way. And when James Reese Europe and the Harlem Hellfighters, who were a regiment during World War I that was formed in New York, they fought in France. But one of the things that people talked about the most were not what they did on the battlefield. French people were obsessed with the music. So ragtime is really, I think, the first version of black music in the United States that goes mainstream, that people across the country would have known, and then jazz kind of replaces ragtime in popularity.
Jazz is the musical expression of the triumph of the Negro spirit.
In New Orleans at the turn of the 20th century, some of the musicians who were the ones who were innovating what became known as jazz, they actually called what they were doing blues. There wasn't a distinction yet. What they were doing was playing blues, but they were using brass instruments.
The two restraining elements in jazz are the form and the changes. They are restraining because of their endless repetition, in much the same way that the Negro experiences the endless daily humiliation of American life.
Wherever you have people of African descent who have access to instruments like trumpets and saxophones, once they start playing those instruments using African musical sensibilities, that's where I think jazz is starting to originate. So we often look at New Orleans as the birthplace of jazz.
Of course, the Negro, as man and or jazz man, must be constantly creative, for that is how he remains free.
And this is blues. Wherever you go, I'll have you to know I wanna be with you. So that's what you call some R&B blues.
You better sing, Miss Naomi.
Blues is so essential to all of black music.
Blues is born out of an emotion.
It's emotion. And it's not all sad. It could be the happy blues. You know, it could be a jig, it could be a jubilee, but blues is basic in terms of African American music. Where does it come from? Somewhere deep in your soul.
The term rock and roll comes out of black vernacular. As early as the 1930s, there were songs that were talking about rocking and rolling. And some of them actually come from black women who sang the blues. Lots of references to "My daddy rocks me with a steady roll," right? And then after World War II is when the style of rock and roll started to take shape. But at the time, it was being called rhythm and blues.
Whether it was rock and roll, big band swing, blues, or jazz, African Americans sought their own elevated spaces and dance halls to host parties and performances.
They desired a venue where they were the guests and treated with dignity, not just entertainers playing to white-only audiences during the Jim Crow era of segregation.
The El Dorado Ballroom in Houston's historic Third Ward provided that upscale place for black Houstonians.
Just as the more famous Harlem institution known as the Savoy Ballroom is called the home of happy feet, the El Dorado adopted that nickname too. And a lot of prominent black social clubs held events there. It became a gathering place. Ray Charles performed there. Duke Ellington performed there. Count Basie's played here. T-Bone Walker's played here. The great Conrad Johnson. In 1947 in Houston, he recorded a song called Howling on Dowling, back when Dowling Street was that drag that's now known as Emancipation Avenue. And in that song, he mentions the El Dorado. It represented achievement and status, both economically and socially among its patrons, but also among the musicians. People like I.H. Smalley, Ed Golden, Arnett Cobb, Milton Larkin. It was a prestige venue.
A young Jewel Brown cut her teeth at the El Dorado before performing with marquee acts like the legendary Louis Armstrong.
Now it's time for our vocalists to come up and entertain you. Here she comes, Jewel Brown, right here.
At the El Dorado, I was 12 years old when they called me. And I went there and used to do my show with a wonderful dance group called Tommy and Orr. They were some great guys. I never will forget it. Oh, and when I'd sing songs like C.C. Rider, oh my goodness, it's like the floors was just, it was really something else. And the windows back in the day, they pushed out from the bottom.
While on the weekends and at night, it was an adult establishment set up to entertain. It also had a role in the community that makes it extra important, and that is often on Saturday afternoons, they would have sock hops for teenagers and or talent shows where kids that couldn't go in a nightclub could come on a Saturday afternoon and they'd spin records and could dance. There are countless musicians, many of them natives of Houston and some who came from out of town, who first got their recognition by winning a talent show at the El Dorado. One would be a musician who is known by the stage name Peppermint Harris, but then hometown folks like Joe Guitar Hughes, Johnny Guitar Watson, people like that when they were children got to perform on that stage, won talent shows that gave them the affirmation they perhaps could use to say, I've got a life in music. The El Dorado Ballroom. It did change a few times over the years. There was a fire at one time and there was some reconstruction. Once Project Row Houses acquired it, there were a series of events, particularly in those first few years. In November of 2003, that would have been the 100th anniversary of the birth of a native Houstonian, Don Roby, who went on to found Duke and Peacock Records.
It's the first time that there's a black person in charge of what's going on. He predates so many of the black entrepreneurs who are going to use music as a base of their economic empires. Without Don Roby, there's not even Berry Gordy in Detroit to be inspired by what he's seeing going on in Houston. He was inspired by Don Roby and Duke Peacock.
Big Mama Thornton and Bobby Bland and Junior Parker and all kinds of famous people.
Big Mama Thornton signed a record deal with Peacock and she made the song Hound Dog. And Hound Dog, of course, was covered by Elvis Presley.
Those artists received their props by way of the Rado's rebirth.
We drew a lot from folks who were still alive in the region and in the community that could come in and help us understand what the El Dorado had been, what it could be.
Under new direction and with the generous support of Houston's philanthropic community to the tune of $10 million, the El Dorado Ballroom underwent a massive renovation and remodeling. In the spring of 2023, it reopened its doors as a special events venue.
So many American cities look the same, but when you find something that's distinctive, that's rooted in that place historically, and it isn't just physically there, but that is of that place, you know, that's a different kind of thing. It can meet a need as a place where people can connect with each other, connect with the neighborhood, connect with the city, and connect with our history.
My name is Michael Harris. I'm the longest running continuous talk show host in Houston at this time. I have been with KCOH since 1975. We played whatever happened to be hot at the time.
An R&B audience for sure, R&B and gospel. And it was pretty much like that across the country, but here there was just a taste of black country in there that I found unusual and appealing.
They would bring records to us to break. Remember, we also ended up in the movie Ray.
We're listening to that new recording, Mess Around, by Atlanta recording artist Ray Charles. And we have the gentleman live here in the KCOH studios. So Ray, when you're not making your own music, what do you listen to?
Well, you know what? The fact is, King B, man, I really and truly love gospel, man. I mean, one of my favorite groups is from right here in Houston, the Cecil Shaw Singers.
You heard it. Ray Charles endorses Houston's own Cecil Shaw.
Ray Charles, we broke records for him. James Brown, Parliament, Funkadelic, even Charlie Pride came through.
The music was paramount to me, but then as I matured, I understood that I had an obligation to try to enrich a community too. We entertained people, but then we had a public service that helped stoke a movement because we were messengers.
I played message songs. I played speeches from Dr. King, from Malcolm, and other folk, because people needed to hear those words.
And what you and I have to let the man know is we are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us.
And I think this march will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, demonstrations for freedom and human dignity ever held in the United States. I'm sure that many things will happen as a result of the march.
Music played a very large role in the civil rights movement.
And, you know, with the civil rights movement, I think you can especially hear how gospel, rhythm and blues, and rock and roll are all cousins. The songs that demonstrators were singing sometimes were revamped spirituals. So just like during the Civil War, when freed people were taking spirituals and changing the lyrics and talking about Abraham Lincoln and the Union Army, people in the 1960s kind of remix the spirituals and make them about the civil rights movement.
From the civil rights movement to now, the role of black radio remains prominent.
I always say to you, you never know who stops by the happy hour, of course. My boss is always walking through the neighborhood. Mr. Walker, you like to come up and say a little something?
I'm going to say a little something. How you doing, Busy?
Well, I'm Ernest Walker, General Manager of KTSU 90.9, your community station on the campus of Texas Southern University, and also an amazing drummer.
Do you recognize this one, right? There you go.
My dad would play KTSU in our house every single Sunday. We had a family gospel group called the Walker Brothers, and KTSU was actually the very first station that ever played our record and gave us a chance. So my dad was very loyal to KTSU, and for this to come full circle, for me to be here today is an honor.
What is it that you love about music?
I love how music brings people together. It tells a story. It can make you happy. It can make you sad when you're going through challenges in life. You can turn on to some good music and it can change your attitude, your mindset.
KTSU 90.9 has played it all from the HBCU campus of Texas Southern University since 1973, when it became the first African-American FM radio station on Houston airwaves.
At KTSU, you have what we call like a gumbo mix of music. Normally when you tune into the radio station, you get one genre of music, but when you tune into KTSU, you can get jazz, you can get blues, you can get zydeco, you can get hip hop, you can get gospel music.
Like other black radio stations before them, KTSU provided a platform for artists to launch their careers.
KTSU launched a program that was called Kids Jam on Saturdays. And when there was no other station in the city that would play hip-hop, the up-and-coming artists came to KTSU, and we had a platform, and they said, let's play hip-hop on Saturdays. And that's how it all started, with a show called Kids Jam. And when you think of the Ghetto Boys or UGK or Lil Kiki or any of those local artists, this was the station that gave them a chance. And we continue to do that today.
There is also a recording studio for artists to use at KTSU. And when no one is recording, there's still music being made and artists marching to the beat of their own drum, including Ernest, the very man at the top, forever in tune with his campus and the community, including yours truly.
I'm ready to hit the road.
A new decade ushered in old sound that took black music back to its roots.
And I think you could hear that in some of the funk music of the late 60s, early 70s, where people start producing these 9-minute songs. Parliament maybe might have a 15-minute song, right? And I think a lot of that is trying to intentionally tap into the music of our ancestors. That emphasis on rhythm is so key to late 60s, early 70s music. People were being very intentional about these heavy, hard rhythms.
Funk music is a sound that coincided right along with disco.
Jim Crow told people where they were allowed to exist. You cannot go here if your skin is this color. You can't sit in this part of the bus. But then I think that there's a reason that disco is the post-civil rights music. The dance music also had qualities of liberation that were part of it. I think that disco is liberation music. When I hear it, all disco has a message of uplift. It is all about I will survive and I'm coming out. And all of these songs, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real by Sylvester, right, almost feels like a declaration of independence in of itself. And I think if you look at the people who were the most popular disco artists, these are all people of color, they are diverse women, and you also have a lot of influence of LGBTQ musicians in disco. And I think that that's where some of the liberating aspects of disco come from. It's just maybe not happening in a march, it's happening on a dance floor. A lot of R&B and funk artists start to incorporate rap verses into their songs. So the rap verse on a song kind of becomes standard in around 1980.
By the early 1980s, Houston rap artists were just coming into their own,
giving birth to the H-Town sound and a new generation of music producers, artists, and musicians who are unapologetically H-Town.
both in their music and style. The H-Town sound is unapologetically Houston, just like three of its biggest stars.
This is 3 generations of hip-hop.
I make big money, I drive big cars.
Willie D of the Ghetto Boys.
First generation, 80s into the 90s.
H-Town, Texas, tell me how does it look?
Bun B, the Trill OG.
Second generation, 90s into the 2000s.
I'm draped up and dripped out.
And Little Kiki.
This is third generation, 2000 into the 2010s.
All three rep Houston, and that H-Town sound hard. They'll quickly tell you Houston had to stand out from the start.
Before Ghetto Boys, they really thought that we were still riding around on horses and wagons out here.
What was it about the Ghetto Boys sound that was able to break through?
It was H-Town. It was us being the underdogs. For a while, we were consumers. People in Houston was just buying records, and at some point, we was like, we got something to say too. So we started chronicling our experiences, our Southern experiences, our Houston experiences. Like we wasn't familiar with subways. We wasn't familiar with gangs and things like that. So we talked about the things that we did know.
Neighborhoods and life in the streets drove the lyrics. It's an entire culture with its own language.
a love language that spoke to fans and music execs.
With the cars and the candy paint and the swingers, it's like a vibe.
Once you stepped in the streets, you realize how powerful it was, how big the influence was.
84s, red toes, candy apple flip-flop.
Now you're talking about bumper kits and grills and elbows and all that.
On the streets or the slab, you'll find 4.4s, a vintage car rim.
The 4.4s is 4 of the foes. That's 484s.
But you could also come from the 4.4.
Which is Acres Homes, right?
Which is Acres Homes.
Right.
So these terms work together. You could be holding the slab in a slab, riding on 4.4s in the 4.4. You could put all that together and you would not be having any double negatives.
Still tipping on 4.4.
And I still hear it all the time. You still hear this 20-year-old song from sports arenas to Texans games.
That's a testament to our culture. That's what we're explaining, that there is no other culture that's going to continue to be the driving force of making these songs.
And that's why at the end of the day, good music is good music. If you just put it in pocket, you got a good beat, you got good words, you got a nice hook, and you're saying something substantive, people will respond and they'll reward you for it.
It seems like Houston artists love to collaborate. Am I right?
No, because we all actually genuinely like each other.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
There is mutual respect and admiration for those no longer here, like Bushwick Bill, Pimp C, Fat Pat, and the legendary DJ Screw, all influenced other Houston heavy hitters. Artists like Paul Wall and Mike Jones were able to build their brands from the foundation already laid by the pioneers of the sound. Collectively, they have cranked out so many classics. Together, they'll just keep swinging and banging.
Music built this attractive Los Angeles home for Jessie Mae Robinson, whose tunes have been heard and sung by millions in recent years.
Black musicians have composed, conceptualized, played, and sung in just about every genre and for every audience.
And on some occasions, they have combined all these sounds and talents to create something really special. Singer-songwriter and musician Gabe Baker has a special touch with the cello. An instrument and sound that's made him a standout both now and then.
So I was kind of the football guy who could play the cello around campus for a little time period.
Gabe attended Rice University, where he studied environmental engineering and was captain of the football team, making 3 bowl appearances and 1 conference championship.
I played at a couple student athlete events.
Back then, Gabe played the cello casually, more so as a hobby, dabbling in the campus orchestra and taking lessons when he could find the time.
For one semester, I took lessons from a grad student here at the Shepherd School, all until I broke my hand during football spring practices. So to me, it was like a colliding of 2 worlds. Like, I just remember I was like, hey man, I can't take lessons anymore.
We recently caught up with Gabe inside the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University. Years later, his hand is more than fine.
You're so balanced, I'm so wavy, you're so steady.
Gabe now plays and tours with the international Christian pop duo sensation for King and Country, traveling the world playing to packed audiences from Australia to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
I get so much satisfaction for doing music in general, and then also being able to branch out into different expressions of it, instrumentally, even songwriting or collaboration-wise. Not feeling like I have to be in a certain box or a certain aspect of music gives me a lot of satisfaction.
And it gives him a lot of freedom to be himself and create.
I think you just want to be you in the space of creating, and whatever comes out of that you-ness as a creative, you want to live in that, but also want to fine-tune your sounds.
While remembering his roots.
But nothing and no one's ever gonna shut me down, no.
I'm definitely a homage to so many great creatives that have come before me.
And like those who came before him, pushing musical boundaries, Gabe could very well define the next genre and sound.
But I'm looking at these traveling shoes, yes I am. I'm looking at these traveling. Oh, I'm looking at these traveling shoes. I'm looking at these traveling shoes. I'm looking at these traveling shoes. Oh.
Music festivals bring artists to the people, and in the case of Juneteenth, to the very heart of 3rd Ward and Emancipation Park.
In 1872, 4 former enslaved men purchased the land that is Emancipation Park for African Americans to have a place to celebrate Juneteenth. Today, there are multiple celebrations, including an annual music festival.
I think you could have a debate on what's more important to Juneteenth, the barbecue or the music. Going way back to the early 20th century, I have evidence of Juneteenth celebrations being a place where the organizers spotlighted the local music of what was going on. So Juneteenth has long supported local musical talent. Music is such a part of Black society. It's part of the thing that I think that we have maintained from our ancestors, that there are different versions of music for different events, different settings. And I think if you look at something like Juneteenth and Emancipation Park, whose headlining is always a big deal and a big draw to it, it also shows just the significance of music to Black history and especially the history of emancipation itself.
This Juneteenth, there is so much to celebrate. The grandmother of Juneteenth, 97-year-old Opal Lee, recently received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor one can receive. She was bestowed the recognition for her decades-long campaign to establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday, a dream that came to fruition in 2021.
Another dream soon to be fulfilled, the Gospel House and Museum in historic 3rd Ward, not too far from Emancipation Park. The Wesley African Methodist Episcopal Church is undergoing a renovation and revitalization to be transformed into a museum and cultural performing arts center. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee recently announced a first-of-its-kind $4.1 million grant awarded to the city of Houston for the adaptive reuse of the historic church.
And while there's a National Juneteenth Museum scheduled to open in Fort Worth, Texas in 2026, historian Sam Collins continues to advocate for an international museum in the birthplace of Juneteenth, Galveston, with hopes for an interactive museum experience to include sound and music.
The legacy of song continues from churches to concert halls, festivals, and even classrooms.
Be sure to download and share our specially curated Juneteenth playlist on KHOU.com and watch on KHOU 11+.
It's up to all of us to continue to educate one another about the importance of Juneteenth as we remember where we came from and what we can achieve in the future.
More.
right, thank you, thank you. All right, everybody enjoy that? Yay! Thank you, students, for joining us today. We are, we're blessed to have Boris Miles's group here, Miles Ahead Scholars, and they are visiting UHD today. We got to give them a hand. Thank you, guys. We just learned about this program. It is for African American and Latino males and encouraging them to pursue higher education. Thank you, Boris Miles, for having this program and bringing them here to us here at UHD. All right, we've got a few minutes to ask some questions. And I know you've enjoyed this documentary. Let's just start right off. If you want to ask a question, we've got a microphone over here, but we can kind of walk it around. But I'm going to take the personal liberty and just ask, how did you guys enjoy this, doing this documentary, and are there more to come?
I have a couple thoughts. Very proud. The young lady in the red dress playing the piano, that's my daughter.
Oh.
The other thing, me and I, when she showed me clips along the way, you heard the guy singing the song about the mercy seat. Mm-hmm. I had never heard the song, but my mother, who's been dead 2 years, was a minister, and it was called the Mercy Seat Ministry. So when I heard that song, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really special. So though having those elements, of course, with all the other elements that we were able to get, the archive footage, the sound, the connection to H-Town, Mia did a phenomenal job. She was the driving force in this, and I'm really proud, very proud.
Okay.
Driving force. Sometimes I drive the car a little too fast. Everybody holds on, right? But that's the thing. I started off when I put together the overview this year. Dale Lockett, who's in the back, he's the executive producer, and I showed it to Dale. Dale smiled at me and he looked at me and goes, "This is rather ambitious, Bia." But would we expect anything less, right? And I'm just so thrilled how it all came together. Music is such a big part of my life. I don't play an instrument. I don't sing. I danced for years, but music and the emotions that it brings touches me and moves me in such a way almost every single day throughout my life that it just seemed natural. And when you look at the contributions made by African American musical artists, producers, record label executives like Mr. Pirasile with KCOH Radio, it has just been this wonderful collection that's such a gift to all of us. And when I say all of us, not just African Americans, everyone around the world has enjoyed these sounds. And when you look at Houston and what it's contributed, it's so vast. I mean, really, we could have broken off and done a special just on jazz music. Oh, Dale would have loved that. He's a huge jazz
next
fan.
Year.
Yes, and next year. But it also was such a source of pride. And this year's project had a lightness to it that I felt like was needed because the subject matter gets really heavy, right? The Black experience. From slavery to today, it gets really heavy, and music offered that lightness and that source of pride. I can't tell you how many times I've watched this, right? Because as the main producer on it, I'm constantly watching it saying like, oh, we need to fix this, or we need to do this. Can we add this sound? But every single time I watch it, I just feel a swell of pride and happiness and emotions. I find myself smiling at the same place. I find myself laughing at the same place, tearful. It just really is a project that I have felt. And I really hope, we do this with the intention to educate others. And I hope this year, not only do we educate people, but we moved people as well, too.
Questions from the audience? I wanted to add, I heard only passing glance, but I know it's an hour documentary. I wanted to hear some Zydeco.
Oh, Deborah, ouch. So
You
Here's the thing with Zydeco.
Okay, Mia, you have to answer this.
So
Roger
I come from a Creole family. I grew up with Zydeco music. That's what we listened to in my household. My father's first language was Creole. He didn't even speak English until he moved to Texas. So that's my father either listened to news talk radio, imagine that, or Zydeco music or sports radio. And so that's what I grew up with. In February of this year, I had the honor of telling the story of Zydeco music as it's related to Houston. I interviewed one of the best Zydeco music artists there is, Step Rito. He's phenomenal. But here's the thing. It's only an hour, and technically it's only 58 minutes and 30 seconds. And something had to get left on the edit room floor, and it was so hard, but Zydeco was it, most in part because I had introduced it to the audience already. That content is out there. You can go to KHOU.com and see the phenomenal story. These other stories we had yet to tell. And so when it came time to make those decisions, that's the decision I had to make. And my producer and editor, amazingly talented editor, Pacifica, she looked at me and she turned her chair around, and she doesn't usually do this. And she goes, "Are you sure this is the sacrificial lamb?" And I said, yes, it's got to go. But KHOU.com, Zydeco, and you'll find it.
And you can also see the other three.
Yes.
If you have not seen them, the other three documentaries are all online as well.
It's called binge watching.
Yes, it is.
We can do that. Oh, also, I mean, if my son were here, he would also want to know, you didn't mention Chopped and Screwed.
Well, we had a little quick mention of DJ Screw in there, and he's a part of the mural. But again, on Houston hip hop, you could do an entire documentary as well about it. There's so many, and that's what's amazing. You have these genres that were really birthed here, because Zydeco music, a lot of people think it started in Louisiana. It actually started here in Houston, Texas. It was the rural sounds of Louisiana, and then they plugged in bass and started using bass instruments, and that's how they developed the sound of Zydeco music. But that's the amazing thing about Houston, right? That there's so much talent and artistry that comes from here that makes it easy to tell the story about music. However, it makes it hard to squeeze everything in.
Okay,
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Thank you for bringing that together, because too many people don't realize that I can.
She'll project like the opera singers from down low.
Exactly. No, I just want to thank you for the reminder that so much of our music is based here, and there's so many of the artists that we as Houstonians, as a native, recognize it. My husband being from Kansas doesn't know who these people are, but I find it beautiful.
You don't know who Bun B is?
Or Lightning Hopkins, but and that's the thing about it, right? It's nice to see these reminders as well, and that's what I love about music. I don't think there's anything else that can take you back to a place in time, right? And you're like, oh, I remember when this was on the radio, and and again, physically moves you to either sing or to move in your seat. Again, I found myself doing that today, but there's something about music, and there's something about that H-Town pride that we all have, even in the music.
And it's funny because I lived in Deborah Harbor.
Yes.
And we used to drive on Lyons Avenue, and I remember I told my husband, I said, okay, B.B. King used to play here, and the theater was here, and there were so many reminders of being, that I could see in this.
Was it the Deluxe Theater? You said on Lyons Avenue. Yes, ma'am. Which is...
In fact, there was a little donut shop that we used to stop at every morning to get donuts, and we would see who was playing there.
Oh, how special out on the marquee. Yeah. And that's the wonderful thing in doing this story, and part of our interview that we shot with Dr. Steptoe, who is with the University of Arizona, but she is a native Houstonian. That's why she knows this area and the music so well. But we shot with her at the Deluxe Theater, and what's wonderful is to see the rebirth of these venues that so many Houstonians grew up either passing by or going to concerts. My own mother going to concerts at some of these venues. So the Deluxe Theater, the El Dorado Ballroom, now back to its glory. It's really special to see that history live on in a new way.
I don't know if you even knew, the gentleman who was reading General Order Number 3 from Granger, that we had read the whole text. That was Bun B reading it. Yeah. So that was Mia's idea to have him come in and do that. It was a nice touch. Nice touch. Question? Any other questions?
Thank you for that. So appreciate it.
Do you want to ask them anything professionally? You can also do that because they're here.
No, I really enjoyed the documentary, and so I wanted to know how long does it take to do this? How long does it take to put all this together, to get all the people that you have to interview, to do all the, to shoot all the B-roll? Like how long to edit it? How long do you guys plan in advance to even start working on something like this?
So Mia's going to answer it, but I'll tell you what happens. This is the way we look at the end.
So we go on vacation starting next week. So the process starts immediately once the project airs. So I start, let me really be honest, there's a 10-year plan up here, an idea of different subject matter and different themes for each year. But as soon as we wrap, I come back from vacation, I start putting together the overview for the following year's special as well. So it's over a course of a year. We usually shoot everything in the same year, but if I know there's something that is timely and it's going to pass and we're not going to have the opportunity to capture it again on camera, I'll go ahead and make plans for it. So if you watch last year's special, Freedom to Learn, we really was a tribute to HBCUs and historically Black colleges and universities. And you can't talk about HBCUs without talking about homecoming. So I was like, we have to go shoot homecoming on a Saturday. There was a crew of us on a Saturday in the fall, and a crew that was diverse, and that's what I love, that headed off to Prairie View and had the full homecoming Saturday experience. But again, that was in the fall. In October, and the special wasn't going to air until June. So there's quite a bit of pre-planning there. There are also different events that will happen. When I put together the overview, I was not aware of the Gospel House and Museum that's coming to Third Ward.
That we learned late in the process about it.
Yeah, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, her office sent us a press release about it. Then I, in turn, went to the news desk and said, I've got a great weekend story for you. By the way, I also need it for Juneteenth, so it was a 2-for-1 special. So just, really staying in tune to what's going on in the community, paying attention to things like that might come across our news desk or on social media as well. And then trying to plan it in such a way where we can still execute our day-to-day jobs doing the newscast, because during all this production and all this shooting, we're still doing 3 newscasts a day and sometimes stories for those newscasts as well.
I feel like typically most of the on-camera stuff we do, the stand-ups at Emancipation Park, at Reedy Chapel, at the rap mural, was all in early May, I believe. And typically that's when we're doing it, because we know we have a sense of how the documentary is coming together, and so we know what to say, how to string it together. And then if you notice, Chris Luna is here, one of our incredible photographers.
He's the director of photography. Go ahead and stand up, Chris.
So
he likes being behind the camera.
all those decisions on how to shoot, like in Reedy Chapel, that intricate look at the organ and the shot rolling down the aisles, that's all his concept. And so it really helps. And it also helps, this being the 4th year, I think it's true, Mia, it gets easier in terms of knowing where to go to get stuff, in terms of archival footage. And we also took music that we knew we had in-house that we could bring back, and interviews, like with the opera singers. The gentleman, Lawrence Brownlee, happens to be my nephew. So I had
it's a
sound.
family affair.
I had sound with him, and I just went back and looked at the original interview and expanded it with he and Nicole. So we were fortunate in that sense. Mia kept saying, "Ooh, we can repurpose." And she's right, because you don't have to have seen it before, or even if you did, now it's in a sort of different context. And that helped us in terms of content for this documentary.
So the opera story had already aired, the Houston rap legend story that had aired as well. That was something that I did special for the Grammys. And again, always going to leadership at the station saying, okay, so we'll get this for Grammys, and I'm going to use it for Juneteenth as well. So just being really smart about those decisions and repurposing, because even though it aired in a newscast, the odds of everyone tuning in at 6 that day to see it, may have been slim. So why not expose it to even more people if possible?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the presentation, appreciate it. My questions, you mentioned that you don't sing or play, but I'd be curious to hear both of you guys, your musical influences, and if not influences, maybe favorites. And then second question would be, beyond this documentary series, do you have any other ideas for any other creative projects you're working on outside of this?
Are you kidding?
Outside of this?
Yeah, no, and I know, and the reason I'm asking, because you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that last statement where you guys have, you have a full-time job, 3 newscasts, but you found time to do this. And so just curious, as a creator, like how do you make time for that? And then also other dreams that you guys may have beyond what you're doing currently.
You can start with like the influences and the...
So musical influences for me, like I said, I grew up with Zydeco. My mother loved R&B. My oldest brother was a DJ at parties and things. So, and he's 13 years older than me. So oftentimes he would have a traveling like setup. I want to say it was a record player, right? And it almost looked like a suitcase, like you close it, like lock it, and that was my my booster seat in the back seat of his El Camino. I would just like sit on it, and that's how we would ride. So there was always music around me growing up, and he loved like. Lynn's always impressed because he's like, man, you know the early stuff. So
She knows stuff because she's my little sister, and I will do a phrase and she'll do the next phrase.
He'll be like,
I'm like, you weren't even born.
How do you know that? But my much older brother, his influence, my other brother liked everything from Pink Floyd to U2. I grew up in Spring when Spring was a little bit more rural, so I listened to country music, George Strait. I mean, when I tell you I listened to it all, rock and roll. I know every single word to most Bon Jovi songs. I have this love and appreciation for all types of music. Personally, I listen to mostly classic R&B. I think I'm very much... my musical taste speaks to my age as well. Like I love a slow jam. That's my music. I love a slow jam. I love New Edition, Bobby Brown. Babyface is one of my favorites. Every single act that he's produced amongst my favorites. I do like rap music as well too. I have a teenage daughter, so she's a huge influence as well. Shout out to her here in the front row. So I love SZA. With this new generation, a lot. With this new generation, we listen to a lot of Drake as well. So, I mean, it's just kind of rap music. I love like UGK, that Bun B. I mean, like you would be shocked at what I could rap right now for you. So, just a wide, diverse, backgrounds in music. I danced though from the time I was 2 until I was 20 years old. I danced my first 2 years in college. So obviously when you are a dancer, there's a lot of musical influence there too. And I danced everything from tap, which is also an homage to African-American history. I can still tap dance to this day. But tap, ballet, so there was more of a classical influence there, point shoes and everything.
Lynn, I think you said Earth, Wind, and Fire in one of your bios?
Oh, you've been reading my bio.
I'm a reporter, man.
The baddest band in the land.
Absolutely.
Recognize. And that tells you how old I am. I grew up around listening to jazz and my mother loved a lot of different, and I have some of her old albums, so I had to get a record player, Dale, so I could listen to the vinyl again. So I grew up listening to James Weldon Johnson on a record. He had a thing called God's Trombones. This is going way back. And she loved Tom Jones. She loved Dionne Warwick. And then I sang in choirs, church choirs in high school, and a community choir 1 or 2 years after. So I'm very familiar with gospel. I remember going to national conventions. I can still remember rehearsals and the performances and the songs. That's why the evolution of gospel, that story I did, was so cool to me, because in small town Troy, Ohio, we sang with a kind of, very drawl, slow. And then we go to Dayton, Ohio, down the road to bigger, and they had organs and guitars and drums. And it was like, ooh, is this church? What is this? So really loved it. And then I was a DJ for 5 years before I got into news. And so I was part of the disco era. I mean, I was in disco clubs. I was in the garage in New York. So I have an appreciation for a wide spectrum of music. I gained an appreciation for classical music later. You evolve with your taste and so forth. So I have a wide array of tastes, but Earth, Wind, and Fire, I'm telling you. Luther Vandross, I'm telling you. Donny Hathaway. So I could go on and on. But that's sort of my background. I like that. To this day, the newsroom gets a kick out of me telling this story. You don't know who Megan Thee Stallion is? I said, who's Megan Thee Stallion? So I Googled who she was.
In the middle of the newsroom. Have you ever seen a Meg music video?
And she was twerking. They said, don't do that. I was like, click. I said, oh, she's good.
One more question. We've got time for one more. Anybody else? Last chance, last call. Oh, yes.
I'm just curious, did you guys try to reach out to the Queen Bee for your documentary?
Beyonce. So here's the thing with our music artists. Oh, believe me, I have. Every single time I hear she's in town, it's like, we gotta talk to Bee. The challenging part about doing this documentary is music rights. And so the bigger artists, the more challenging the music rights. And that ends up becoming a much bigger discussion. You have some legal that's involved and so forth. And
costs
I was just
involved.
about to say, major cost involved. And again, the purpose of this content is as an educational piece. So with that said, our cost, we're trying to be responsible with what we're spending as well. So there's a reason why you don't see several of the big artists, right? So why is there not a Meg? Why is there not a Beyonce? That would be why. Bun has been a longtime friend, Kiki, that whole entire crew. Like I used to go to music festivals before they were Bun and UGK and Slim Thug. My husband and I, then boyfriend and girlfriend, right, would be sitting front row and be like, hey, great to see you this weekend at this festival. So it was easier to make that connection and have them sign off on things for us as well.
And they're hard to get. I mean, you don't see Beyonce do unless it's her project, her documentary.
Bingo.
You don't see Gayle King interview her. It's just very rare. So it's tough. It's really. But if we could get her, we would talk to her.
I will say this too. It was nice to be able to feature some of the up and coming talent like Gabe Baker and to give him a national spotlight, because even though we produce this content and it airs on KHOU, it's been seen by millions around the world on our digital platform. So to be able to give, you know, an up and coming artist like Gabe that platform, and then also to pay tribute to some of our legendary artists as well again. And not just the artists, but the DJs like at KCOH, Michael Harris, we've known him for a long time. And I don't think anyone had really told the story of KCOH like we had, nor the story of KTSU. So I grew up listening to KTSU radio. I still listen to KTSU radio. Ernest Walker, I've known for a long time. Here's the beauty part of storytelling, though. I had known Ernest for a long time. I knew Ernest was a drummer. I never knew Ernest was a member of the gospel Jackson 5. Did they not look like the Jackson 5 family, right? Like, I never knew that until we were there. And, you know, I'm asking these questions, and he explains, you know, how it started with his dad and how his dad was faithful. So I had no idea until we went and told the story. The other thing, Chris and I shot the KTSU 90.9 story together, Ernest's story. And so I'm like, I looked at Chris and I'm like, you know what? I really needed to get video of him playing the drums. Do you think there's like drums here? We're inside the radio station,
Ta-da.
right? Like we're inside the radio station. Why would they have drums at a radio station? Think about that. And Chris looks at me and he's like, well, let's see, right? So we asked Ernest, and Ernest's like, oh yeah, it's over in the studio. I had been to KTSU several times. Studio? I'm like, well, aren't we in the studio? He's like, no, the recording studio across the way. We walk into the most beautiful, most professional recording studio where you've had major music artists record there. And he's like, oh yeah, the drums are back in this room. Apparently it's a special room even for the drums, right? Had no idea. And it was just like the gift that kept on giving. And here I'm thinking like, I already know his story. And that's the beauty part about storytelling and being a journalist, just these beautiful nuggets that present themselves along the journey. Same thing with Inside Reedy Chapel. When I went there, I had no idea about the organ. I knew the church itself was historic and I knew its place in history, but had no idea that they had one of only two of these historic organs, and that the other one was in the Smithsonian. And when she said that, I was like, can you say that again on camera? This time we're gonna walk and talk. Okay, we're gonna pan and shoot, you know, the organ from top to bottom. But once again, it's just something, you know, and asking questions and listening. I wish our young people were still here, but I always say one of the most important, or I would say the most important skill as a journalist and as a storyteller when you're out there collecting the story is just listening. It's not even about you talking, it's about listening to them and what they're saying. And then like, oh wait, what was that? Where did this organ come from? And that's where it leads you to something beautiful like this.
Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you, Mia Bradley and Len Cannon. And just so everybody knows, you know, we saw it as a debut, but it will air tonight.
Tonight at 7 p.m.
Tonight at 7 p.m. on Channel 11
These are
News.
Juneteenth plans that you don't have to reschedule or cancel because of the weather. Okay, you can go home and watch it tonight. And
Tell your friends.
Yes, I was about to say.
You saw it.
Yeah, encourage your friends and family to watch it, and even friends and family who are out of state. The link will be on the website for you to share with them as well. So thank you. You've been an amazing audience.
Okay.